Again, welcome everybody, and those that just arrived, welcome to the January 22nd, 2018 special called work session. Tonight we have 5 items on our agenda. Public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you are required to fill out a public comment card, and if you're speaking on behalf of an organization, you must fill out an affidavit that you have the authority to speak on that or for that organization. Please remember this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone, stating your name and address for the record. Public comment will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Public comment will be heard at the beginning of each item. And once the item is called, no other public comment cards will be accepted. Also, and with the approval of council, I'm going to allow if there's any general public comment before we get started. So, Sudi, do we have any general public comment?
Yes, sir, we do have 2. I do have a card from a gentleman, Scott Sawyer. What item did you want to speak on, sir? No. Okay, thank you. The first speaker for general comment is Becky Seward.
Obviously not, Becky. But
No problem. Just step up, just take a deep breath and relax. We're just people up here and want to hear what you have to say. So if you just state your name and address just for the record, and then
sure.
Love to hear your comments.
Rick Seward, 13200 Freemanville Road.
And I'm Sandy Krauser, 13180. We're neighbors.
Okay.
So we're here really to voice our concerns about a number of accidents that have occurred on Freemanville Road. I don't know if you all are just north of Mayfield, where there's kind of like an S-curve in Freemanville. We've had at least 3 wrecks in the last probably 2 months. Fortunately, nobody's been seriously hurt, but in talking with the police officers when they come, it's generally all a result of speeding. And it's you know, the speed limit is 40, but cars are obviously going much faster than 40, generally speaking. And they're not able to make that turn, and they're running off into our yards, ruining our property. And hopefully, you know, I think what we're asking is for support and some guidance on how we can maybe monitor the speed a little bit better through that area. Or potentially do something that would not have these cars be coming into our property and potentially be a big safety factor. So
we would love to prevent someone being killed on those curves. So I've lived in my house for a little over 3 years, and the accident a couple weeks ago was accident number 7. And everyone has totaled their car. Everyone has lived, but we would like to prevent a fatality.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any more general public comments, Sudi?
We have one more, sir.
Okay. And I just want to make a statement. I know several council members and had received calls, and our staff is looking at this situation, and hopefully we'll have something to report back to us here in a little bit. So we have heard you guys. Okay. Go ahead, Sudi.
Next speaker is Colleen DeGrood.
Hello, my name is Colleen DeGroot, and my address is 419 Buckfield Lane. And I'm actually going to piggyback off of the last topic. That was also what I wanted to present. And I think just from a different perspective, so I moved to the Milton community about 2.5 years ago, and I guess have also observed the speed and the accidents. I believe it's 3 accidents in the last 44 days. And our subdivision, and I think that's something that became very apparent to me, is our subdivision is 70 homes. And I don't know if the scale is known. Just for example, I have 2 9-year-olds who are in 3rd grade at Summit Hill, and just in 3rd grade alone, who will feed into both Northwestern Middle School and Milton High School, are 13 3rd graders right now. And I'd love to just have some data. If you take a look at some of the subdivisions that are on Freemanville, just taking a look at people going on Freemanville to school, I don't know if there's any guidelines around roads that do access both the middle and high school, but for me it's also sidewalks. It breaks my heart when I have neighbors whose children are walking on Freemanville, and just the topography of the land, it actually goes into gutters. There's these poor children. I don't know if sidewalks would ever be an option. I have sidewalk envy on Mayfield right now and some of the other roads. But again, just the accidents and seeing the people speed and cross over the line in the middle is definitely a concern of mine. And again, just if there's data, I'd be happy to volunteer.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you. And to anybody, in the public, and to any questions, please feel free to shoot myself or any of the council members an email, and we can get with our staff and get you any information that we have. So thank you for stepping forward and sharing your concerns. Okay, Sudie, that's all our general comments. So do we have any public comment on our first item?
No, we don't, sir.
Okay, if you will sound the first agenda item.
First item is discussion of AT&T small cell. Mr. Carter Lucas.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you may remember, when the small cell towers have come forward, we have basically a two-step process by which they come through. The first step is an authorization to use the right-of-way, and the second step is typically an agreement between the city and whoever the provider is. As part of that, we have generally had the providers come in to give you an update on their program and why they need to be within the right-of-way to make the second step a little bit simpler when we bring the agreements forward. And so tonight, AT&T, Mr. Rich Johnson is here with AT&T to present their program to you. We're currently working on the agreements between the city and AT&T to allow this, but the current tower they are looking at, the small cell tower, is proposed on Mayfield Road, just in between Charlotte and Freemanville. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Johnson to go through AT&T's program.
Thank you, Carter. My name is Rich Johnson with AT&T, 675 West Peachtree Street, Northwest Atlanta, Georgia, 30308. I appreciate the time and opportunity to come and talk with you all today. Really, as AT&T and quite frankly a lot of other providers begin to look at how do they continue to build out coverage and ensure that from a public safety standpoint as well as from a consumer standpoint that the city of Milton is positioned well in the future. As we look to do that from a wireless coverage standpoint, a lot of the new technology is what Carter referenced, which were small cells. And so I know you guys have seen a few of these that are currently around the city from other providers, but when he says towers, really, not to scare folks, they're really on top of, they are small antennas on top of utility poles, roughly 40 feet in height. They would go on to either an existing pole or placement of a new pole. They are really needed now as we start to look at this industry and start to look at the needs of consumers for two reasons. One is for capacity challenges. So right now, a lot of times folks they have a signal, they have 4 or 5 bars on their phone, but their ability to make a call or to use their phone for a line struggles because while yes, you may have a signal, the capacity is at bandwidth. So you are, essentially, slowed down due to the number of folks that are on the network. And in order to relieve this is why small cells are needed. They offer a lot more of a triaged or very local approach to resolving issues where there may be capacity or coverage challenges. But even more forward-looking, having small cells positions a community for the path to 5G. So I know a lot of folks have heard about 5G and what that brings, but right now most folks have 4G LTE on their phones. When we start to look at 5G, you're talking about 10 gigs over the air, which if you're not familiar with that is incredibly fast. So for us, it's about ensuring that we can work with the city, have a process in place by which you guys can look at and review any new attachments or poles as they're needed. And that the agreement sets out, kind of conditions for that type of review and such. So we're certainly excited about this opportunity, certainly excited about working with Milton to ensure that not only do you have the current coverage and capacity needs that residents want, but also done in a way that is reflective of the community, are not large, 150-foot towers that we've seen in the past, are very innocuous, but also put you on a path for 5G and receiving the latest in technology advancements. I'm happy to take any questions or any thoughts.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Mr. Johnson? I've just asked, I believe you stated 40 feet. Is that-
Yeah, generally speaking,
Generally.
you're not going to find them that 55 feet might be the absolute highest you'd ever really need. But for the most part, you try and build, them at 40 feet. And the main issue, the main reason for that is, a lot of folks, when you build a large tower, you're trying to spread it across a larger area of space. When you're looking at a small cell, you want to build it a little bit closer to where that need is, where that capacity is, as well as the spectrum and the bandwidth. And not to get too technical, for 5G is a much shorter bandwidth, and so you need to be a lot closer to where it is. So to be at 55 feet, quite frankly, is almost in many cases too tall, because trees and other stuff are going to block it out. You really kind of want to be lower and closer to the ground.
On the antennas, what is generally the diameter and size of them?
Right, 2 to 3 feet is about how tall they are, and they're maybe, I don't know the exact specific, but 2-liter bottles of Coke together, that's probably about how wide they are.
And so to clarify, when we're talking 40 feet, that's not of the antenna, that's the total height?
So generally, a utility pole is about 40 feet. You put the antenna on top of that, you're looking at 42 to 44
Okay, so we're
feet.
talking about a 2-foot
It
small
sits on
antenna.
top of it, generally, yes.
Okay.
You can come off the side. Sometimes you have some
Just wanna
issues there, but yes.
Yeah, I want to clarify that. That's okay. Any other questions? Councilmember.
And how
Bentley?
many locations?
So right now, AT&T is looking at really just that one that Carter referenced. But as the industry starts to move more towards 5G, as capacity, as more people use the network for everything from Netflix to homework and such, the demand increases. So while right now it's one, it will be additional in the future. I just don't have we don't have that built out at the current moment.
And as this process moves forward, the plans will come through with the application, which would be the next step at some future meeting as soon as we get that agreement worked out.
Okay. Matt?
And the only other question, some of the larger ones have, pines or some kind of things like that. I assume these do not, or am I thinking correctly? Or?
Yeah, so a lot of times we do the pine trees on a tower because it obviously kind of fits with what's around it. These are not necessarily pine trees because they, for the most part, like I said, are on an existing pole, which may have power and other stuff already on it, or if they're a new pole. But what we've done in some other communities is, somebody wants a wooden pole because it kind of fits with what's there, we put it in a wooden pole. If they want a fiberglass or some other type of metal, we could put it in a metal pole because that's kind of what's, the street lights are, in that kind of shape. We don't really have any, concerns one way or the other. It kind of is what fits and what the city needs. But they could be painted, generally speaking, to about any color you probably want. I'm sure you don't want tie-dye, but I mean brown, black, green, those types of colors.
Up to this point, the plans have showed similar to what Mobility's tower was, which was a black metal pole.
But to your point, typically you try to just co-locate them on an existing pole that's already there.
That's the preference, right? So when we go and look at, hey, we have a need in this specific area, the first thing is what's already there, because it's a lot easier, quicker, faster to put something on an existing, cheaper to put something on an existing pole. Sometimes there's circumstances where there's nothing there to attach to, or if you were to attach to it, the impact you would have from a coverage degrades it at such a level that it just wouldn't make sense to put it there. So you got to work through those. But in each and all these cases, us and Carter would work through the specifics in terms of location and where the attachment would go, and try and get to a co-location first for those reasons.
Okay. And Joe?
So right now, there is a lack of coverage in this particular area, or are you using this as a pilot to test technology or something like that?
No, it's not necessarily. I would say necessarily there's a lack of coverage per se in Milton. Now, certainly there might be certain pockets where you're going to have coverage issues. There's a distinction though between coverage and capacity, and so just because you can receive a signal doesn't necessarily mean that you have capacity, right? And so that's the distinct difference. This helps to alleviate, generally speaking, the capacity challenges.
So you have a capacity problem, and it's in this particular location?
At the current moment, yes.
Okay.
And I'm assuming capacity's in this whole industry because of, instead of just cellular service, now it's,
I mean, everybody
you know,
uses it. Think
emails
about all the
and-
stuff you use your
yeah.
phone for and the demand. We've actually seen since 2007 a 250,000% increase on network usage.
One thing I've learned, everybody wants their mobile devices and all the service, but no one wants a cell tower.
And no one wants
near
to,
them.
and we recognize that, right? So that's what this attempts to do is it moves away from those larger towers and moves towards a more innocuous, type design. Quite frankly, you see a lot of the Georgia Power transformers that are on a pole. They're smaller than that, and I think, generally speaking, unless you pointed one out, most folks probably wouldn't recognize it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I just want, when we have to come forward and vote on this, it'd be great just to have a picture. It sounds like it's a huge step forward, so I think the public would probably appreciate seeing a picture. So.
Happily bring you one.
Okay. Anything else? Carter, you want to add anything?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Okay. Sudi, do we have any public comments on our next item?
We do have 3, sir.
Okay.
The first one comes from Jeff Jensen.
I'm not a public speaker. My name is Jeff Jensen. I live at 2250 Dinsmore Road in Milton. I'm here to thank the city for allowing the Milton Country Club tennis courts to remain open for the short term and request that you keep the courts open and available for the long term. My wife, son, and I play tennis since 2009. Between the 3 of us, we have been on 67 different team rosters, all playing out of Milton Country Club. The facility has 4 courts and supported 46 different teams in 2017. That includes boys, girls, men's, women's, mixed, and senior teams. When there's no league play, the courts are used for other competitive matches, instruction, and recreational play. Right now, there are 140 tennis players on various teams playing out of Milton Country Club. 128 of them are Milton citizens. There are an additional 67 players not on teams right now. 62 of them live in Milton as well. That's a total of 190 Milton residents that play out of this facility alone. This brings me to Terry O'Brien. His patience and incredible teaching abilities are the reason he has been the tennis pro at the facility for the last 22 years. Those abilities are proven every year when his teams and individual students win tournaments, division, and city finals. He teaches clinics, group and private lessons. During the warmer months, he teaches as many as 14 group lessons from ages 6 and up. When he's not teaching group lessons, he is teaching individual lessons. His youngest player is 4 years old. For beginners, he hosts Friday evening group lessons. The first group can consist of as many as 45 6 to 12-year-olds. He also holds summer camps for all ability levels, utilizing the tennis courts and in the past the pool as well. Terry is assisted with these big group lessons and camps by high school and college-aged kids who began playing tennis in these same beginner programs. My son John started out in one of those groups 10 years ago when he was 8. He has Terry to thank not only for the love of the game, but also for teaching him the skills needed to play varsity tennis at Cambridge High School and hopefully in college as well. I strongly suggest that any long-term plan for these tennis facilities include Terry O'Brien. There isn't anyone better to be the face of tennis for the city of Milton. Thank you for your time, and thanks again for keeping those courts available.
Thank you, sir. Sudi, if you'd please call the next speaker.
Next speaker is Chris Mathis.
Hi, my name is Chris Matthews, 1710 High Grove Club Drive, Milton, Georgia, 30004, and I'm a resident of Wood Valley. So my family is directly impacted by the recent closing of Milton Country Club. We are cautiously optimistic about the changes that are coming forward, but there are answers that we would like to have to questions. And I know that the City Council has been very open about trying to communicate with everyone, and I appreciate that. Carter, I know you're going to address a number of issues with it after the comments. Some of the immediate concerns that we have a certain level of importance timing-wise is for those of us who have fence lines already that abut the property. There have been comments that there may or may not be a fence put in on the new open park area. How is that going to impact existing fences that property owners already have? Are they going to be right next to them? Are there going to be changes to access to the park? Right now, I have built-in gates where I can access the golf course. Is my family going to be able to continue to have access, especially now that it's going to be a Milton-owned property, rather than drive around a quarter of a mile when I could walk out from my backyard? With that in mind, I need to be able to take measures to ensure that my property is not completely accessible at all times by people who are not my family. I know there were conversations about patrols, and I've read on what the plans are with the police department and the uptick in patrols. But considering the vastness of the acreage there, how are those patrols going to be conducted? Are those going to be on bike? Are those going to be on foot? Are those going to be, are we going to have on horses going through there? Those are questions that I'd like to have answered, as well as the properties that all abut. I addressed the question about the fence lines, but if it's necessary for us to be able to install some type of privacy trees, are those going to be provided by the city, or are those things that I need to start investing in now, so that by the time this park goes live, that I have some type of screening or privacy built in to the part that abuts that property? So those are some of my questions, and I know you're probably going to already address some of them anyway, but I wanted to make sure that we can keep having the lines of communications open, and I look forward to the interaction that Wood Valley has as this process goes forward, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sudi, if you could please call the next speaker.
Our final speaker is Scott Sawyer.
Good evening. Thank you for the chance to talk tonight. Scott Sawyer, 787 Quarterpath Lane. My home sits on the 14th fairway, about the 14th green, so I have a great view of the Milton Country Club. So I have 4 points I wanted to raise, and I do look forward to the presentation about the plans for the course. And I also appreciate the communication that's been provided to date. It's been really good for the city to put out information to the community, so thank you for that. What I was going to propose is I think the city should meet with the 80-plus homeowners whose property abuts the course currently. That's a unique stakeholder group. I think meeting with them sooner rather than later is the idea to address some of the issues that were previously raised about adjacency to the course. We could talk about easements, about fences, and those are some things I've heard discussed as well through my neighbors on the club. I want to propose that the city hire a world-class land development and nature preserve company to assist with the planning. When I think of the course and what it will be as a nature preserve, when you go to Serenbe or when you go to Watercolor, for example, in the Gulf area, we hope it's going to be a place like that. It's not an active park. It's more a place that's a natural area that complements the homeowners and the whole North Valley area there. The third point is propose the city create a citizens green space advisory board for the country club development. I see this separate from the Parks and Recreation group because it's such a unique space that you need an ongoing group to be engaging with the city to not just the adjacent homeowners, but throughout the city. And the last point I had is the cart paths currently, which is outside our homes pretty close, for the city as they develop this land to consider moving some of the cart paths away from the property lines. It's a real concern for just privacy, view shed inside and outside the course. There's ways to do that, to push the trails further away from the homes. And those are my main points. But thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, Sudi, we have one more. Okay.
And that would be Craig Strickland.
Good evening. A couple of points that I wanted to bring up, and they may have been...
If you wouldn't mind, just for the record, state your name and address.
1870 High Grove Club Drive, Craig Strickland.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if the decision's been made on the easements, but that's the biggest concern most of the homeowners have, and that may be addressed in the use program. But as it relates to the easement, if they're not given back to the homeowners that have them, one, you're going to have some thoroughfares right in the middle going down to the current golf course from the clubhouse, and that's kind of a difficult way to allow people or move people through the neighborhood. And I know those that are adjacent to those specific sidewalks are concerned. Mine is more as it relates to the golf cart path and the easements there. Question one is, who's going to maintain that area? Question two, who's liable for that area if somebody gets hurt? And the third is just the overall maintenance. If the property is still mine and a tree falls, who's going to take care of that? So those are my general questions, and hopefully they'll be discussed on land use.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that's all public comment.
That's all, sir.
Sudi, if you would please call this item.
This is the discussion of the Milton Country Club. Mr. Carter Lucas.
And if you don't mind, Carter, real quick before we get started, I do want to thank everybody that's here in attendance. I do want to say that we're very excited with this purchase and think it will be something great for all of our citizens. And quite frankly, this has come along fairly quick as far as, the opportunity was brought to us and we were able to purchase it. That being said, we are very open and transparent. We want to work through a process involved everybody that's impacted as well as our citizens at large and come up with a plan that is the absolute best. That being said, we'll try to answer the questions we can tonight, but if we don't have an answer, that's just because we're still in the process of making the plan and all of your comments. In fact, I wrote down all the items that the speakers have mentioned, and those are all very important. And I can pretty much assure you, and I think everybody else can confirm, that we will certainly take all those items into consideration and work with you as we move forward. So again, right now this is our first meeting talking about what we're going to do, and so we'll get as much information as we have, but just be patient with us. If we don't have some information, that's because this is a work in process, but we certainly want the community and everybody affected to be involved with that.
Well, I hope this presentation is not going to be a disappointment for a lot of people who came out tonight and took some time to come tonight. We had a couple of specific questions that we needed to get answers for programs that are currently underway, and we wanted to highlight the process by which a lot of those questions will be answered. So as you know, we closed on the golf course on Friday afternoon, and at this time we've closed the building and closed the golf course to the extent that we can. So we'll continue to be working on that, posting some signs on the golf course to make sure that people know that the course itself is closed, and we'll be working towards a plan on what to do with both the course and the building. So currently we have a request for proposals out that's advertised due February 13th. To bring in a firm that specializes in this types of activity and can help us through the process, help us through with the stakeholders, help us through with potential uses of the property, and help us evaluate the existing facilities to understand really what we can do with those. The second and third parts of that project are to look at the Central Milton Trail program. So as you remember in our recent blueprint update, we identified a Central Milton Trail which essentially ran from Providence Park to Birmingham Falls Elementary and hopefully at some point further north. And this is kind of the core of that Central Milton Trail. So part of this project that we have out for the RFP now will be to look at that corridor from Providence Park up to Birmingham Falls to understand how we make all those connections and how we get the Milton Country Club connected to that overall system. So during that process is when we will have a lot of the stakeholder groups and a lot of the resident input, feedback, and ideas and discussions on the easements, the locations of the trails, how we secure the property. Many of those questions will be answered through that process. So tonight we had a few programs that we wanted to talk about that are actively going on or proposed to be going on in the front portion of the property with the tennis and the swim community. As you've heard tonight, there are an incredible number of teams that operate out of these four courts. 30 Alta teams and 16 USTA teams are currently operating out of those, managed by Terry O'Brien up there. We've got 9 teams in the current league whose registration was due today that are actively working on the park. So that is for the spring season, which basically runs March 17th through the 28th, and if you're fortunate enough to make the playoffs, you can go on to May. During the summer and fall, there are another 25 teams that are proposed to use the facility. And so what we wanted to discuss tonight was, well, the obvious question, do they continue to operate out of the facility, which we would recommend that they do, and then how we move forward with that. So currently we have not had an opportunity to really go through that program and understand how that program will work within our current agreements and service providers. But our recommendation would be to allow us to move forward with the programs as they exist today, at least through the July timeframe, to allow us to really study the program, the users, and how it would fit into our overall program, and then come forward with a recommendation on how we may either extend the program as it currently exists or modify it to some degree to allow it to fit into our program provider, and whether it's just Alta, USTA, or includes a recreational component, but how best we can use those tennis courts to serve the community. At that time, we will have been through a portion of the process, the master planning process, so hopefully we've got some input from the public on how that operates, and we'll be able to bring forward a better recommendation on how the tennis piece works. Before I move on to the swimming pool, if you wanted to have any discussion on the tennis programs, I'd be happy to answer what I can. Terry O'Brien's also here tonight. If I can't answer any questions, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer anything that you may have.
Our first question I would have then, excuse me, Joe, is obviously staff has talked to Mr. O'Brien directly.
Yes,
and so what you're recommending, you have discussed through a possible scenario that would work. Obviously you would bring it forward, but between the, both parties.
For the short term, it would be basically operating business as usual. Under the current operating agreement, from what we understand, the club paid Terry a salary, and he received whatever fees he got from coaching and the teams. I don't think we have a problem from a staff perspective moving forward with that in the short term, with an eye towards understanding how that fits into the overall program and the scheme with the rest of our service providers in a longer term scenario.
Okay. And I think, Joe, did you have a...
Yeah, I was just going to mention that the feedback that we've gotten from everyone is usually, it has 2 points to it from a tennis program point of view. Number one, keep it going. Number two, make sure Terry's part of it. So as long as we're addressing both those things, I think that's great. I would agree with you that the long-term plan probably has us, and we should be open to anything, but in all other sports, we engage through some type of sponsorship program or contract program with an organization, the support that we need for a particular sport. I wouldn't see tennis as being any different. I think the short-term plan, we obviously have to operate however we need to make sure the program doesn't lapse, but I think the long-term probably holds something a little bit different, like you mentioned.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody else?
Quick question. So what the operating expenses, so when you say it's going to operate as is as the city of Milton, would you say you're going to be paying Terry, maintaining the tennis courts and so on, and do we have a cost for that by any chance?
I don't, but we will be kind of working through that, understanding. So we've got power bills that would be paid. The lights run every evening from 6 to 10, I believe. And then how we structure the agreement with Terry is something that we really need to work through. What we wanted to make sure tonight was that council wanted to move forward with maintaining these programs, and then we'll work through with Terry how that actually looks.
We would bring back any sort of compensation recommendations back to you.
We'd have to formally approve that.
I believe we would. Yes.
But would there be some revenue from these teams? Or you guys, I'm not
Does that
familiar.
revenue go to us or Terry?
Not currently.
Okay.
Yeah. So the goal, and I don't mean to cut you off, so the goal of tonight is to make sure that we move seamlessly as we as ownership transitioned. The structure further down, we don't know yet. It currently functions differently than any other program provider we have, where they collect fees from the participants, and then they pay the city X percentage of that fee that they collect. This currently worked in a different environment. Obviously, it was private sector, and that was part of what attracted members to the club, where they paid their membership fees. Obviously, that's not the same situation now, so we're going to have to figure out what would work. What we're trying to make sure we maintain our focus on is the community members that are involved in the program and how to best meet their needs. The salary is not significant if that was the direction where we would go, especially if we were looking at 6 months. But we'll come back to you further. If you told us, no, we don't want tennis anymore, which is not what I was anticipating, that was the purpose really of tonight, to see whether or not you wanted to cease the program or continue as is. And we'll work out some of the details and bring that back to you.
And I just would reiterate that to the public. Tonight's just a work session. We don't make any formal decisions or votes, but this is an opportunity for us to ask questions with our staff and hear some feedback, as well as let our staff realize, based on the questions we ask, and as our city manager said, if the council was against moving forward, obviously they would hear that tonight, or if there's a general consensus that we would like you to move forward and bring us back some formalities that we can make a decision on at a council meeting. So anybody else on the tennis?
I just think it's a great idea to continue, especially for the residents that are, and this gives us a little bit of time then to figure out how do we transition, how do we format it, but to let it continue, I think, is a good move.
Okay, Matt?
And the only thing I would add as well is, as a program, I think Joe had it right. It can be a much larger program as well, too, and we never know where it can grow or how we can make it better. So in July, as we get to that point, there's always ways we can make improvements, and that can expand a lot of what we do in the city, not just that particular location. So there's always opportunities. We just need to be aware of them.
Along those same lines, we have a great opportunity, because with this being a public facility, we can grow our teams. Sometimes the private clubs are limited with being able to have outside members come onto those teams. So we have inherited a very well-managed, healthy program that I appreciate us, getting those matches going this past weekend, because they were busy 9 to 6 at night, I think. So I'm all for keeping this tennis program intact and seamlessly going. So.
Okay. I just also want to give a shout out, make a couple comments. I don't play tennis. I didn't know Mr. O'Brien or anything about the program. But I have to say this is probably a first since I've been mayor, that when an issue has come up and I've literally gotten at least 100 comments and feedback from citizens, and I'd have to say it's probably the first time that it's all been 100% positive for Mr. O'Brien Terry and the club. So again, that's I just want to give a shout out. Must do a pretty good job. So and look forward to our staff bringing us something back that at least we can do a temporary agreement and move forward and see what the future holds.
All right, thank you. I don't imagine that it'll be too dissimilar from programs that are probably run in Roswell and Alpharetta. So we've got some good examples of neighboring communities who run these types of programs.
Okay.
Pool program's a little bit different. So we don't know much about the pool. It has operated through an outside management agency. They are currently looking at some of the questions that we had on the pool today and hopefully getting some feedback on the functionality of the current equipment. Primarily what we're looking at there is the Milton Mustangs, the swim team that operates out of the club. Approximately 90 participants last year, and no real good data on usage of the pool other than that. So Triumph didn't really have any information that they could provide to us from a pool membership or how many people outside of the swim team that were using the facility. So the question becomes how we operate this pool. Do we operate it only for city functions, city sponsored programs? Do we try and get this thing up and running for the Milton Mustang swim team? Or do we mothball the pool and let it go through the process as we are with the main building? Other than that, I don't know much else about the pool.
Question going back, would, let's use the Milton Mustangs program, for example. Is there, and you may not know, but if it's something we can explore, is there revenue generated that it would at least cover the cost of, and there was a management company or whatever. Can you check into that?
Yes, I can. I don't know the answer to that.
No,
I think some of our thoughts on that needs to wait perhaps until we hear from the condition of what all the equipment is and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
To see
Well, we wouldn't-
what it would, if it's just flipping the switch and throwing some chlorine in it, that's one thing. If it's needs a new pump and this, that, and the other, that may lead us another direction.
We believe that it's operational, but we've not had anybody take a formal, thorough look at the equipment.
Joe?
And we talked a little bit about this earlier, Carter, but for some reason, maybe it's just my experience as a homeowner and surrounding, different pools that surround the area, but there seems to me like there'd be a lot of liability associated with a pool, just the existence of a pool and the ownership of a pool. And the way I remember the country club layout, once you drove onto the property and parked your car, there's not a real significant barrier to getting to the pool, which is where I would go to, where my worry would go, I guess is a good way of saying it. So I don't know if there's been, I know the pool's covered right now, so physically getting into the water is very, very difficult. And I'm assuming we'll leave it like that until we figure out what really to do with it. But I just worry about the availability or the ease of access to the pool if it wasn't covered.
So the pool is gated, typical 4-foot gate, self-closing gates. We have constructed some barriers so the tennis teams use the bathrooms that are by the pool. So on the aerial that you see here, the bathrooms are on the pool end of the building. So we have constructed some barriers, pedestrian barriers, basically to cordon those off to separate it from the pool structure itself. But at this point, you'd bump your head if you fell in the pool. There's no water in the pool. And the pool guy is looking at that to try and determine why that is.
So, yeah, I think that to the question earlier, too, is, what's the condition and what it costs to maintain it, as well as I'd also like to know, if you give us a little bit of information, but on the use and the community's thoughts on it, too. So, Matt?
Yeah, and I was going to say about the community's thoughts as well. I don't know we've had enough of an opportunity to hear from the community's thoughts on this. And I'd like to hear more. Somehow, over the 6 years I've been in office, I've heard about needing a pool maybe once or twice, but most of it was because they were already down at Wills Park and using that pool down there. I did hear one comment stating to keep it as well since that time, since we were going through this process, but I think it might have been overshadowed by the quality of work that Terry's been doing because everybody's talking about how great the tennis is, but that doesn't mean the pool is bad. It just, it hasn't been, you kind of maybe under the shadows of tennis. So I can go either way with it, but I would love to hear more from the community about their thoughts on our needing a pool.
We've been getting some interest in the pool. Shannon, would you mind? If it's okay. We have been getting some input. We got some input early on, and I know that we've been answering a lot of questions from a communication standpoint regarding the pool. So would you mind just addressing that real quick?
Okay.
We've had some interest in it. Can't give you a number. I can get that to you all tomorrow. More than anything, the interest has been expressed has been overwhelmingly tennis, but there has been some interest in specifically to the swim team.
Mm-hmm. Now, can you just do me a favor and just talk about the listserv real quick while you're up here?
Yes, just for those who may be in attendance and who may be at home watching, we have an email listserv that we've set up that's we're referring to as MCC Neighbors, and it's open to those who are adjacent property owners directly to the Milton Country Club, and that's to set up that communication line for that particular stakeholder group. We'll still do the larger stakeholder groups the same way that we did with Providence Park, but that particular initial group, so if you have not shared your email address, if you email info@cityofmiltonga.us, I can add you to that distribution list.
Okay, and that's, very important. Thank you for doing that. Hopefully the residents here that are either watching or in attendance realize we certainly take it very serious that those that are especially directly impacted should have a big say-so in moving forward in the plan. So we want to hear from you and keep you involved on that. Rick?
Can you tell us, Carter, what's the size of the pool? Is it Olympic size? Is it
25-yard pool, probably 5 to 6 lanes wide, and 4 to 5 feet deep. There's not a deep diving end like you would see in some pools.
Okay. And I guess this could be an asset, but I think what Joe had mentioned too is looking at what is the condition, kind of taking that into account. I guess the suggestion is maybe talk to Alpharetta, because I know when I had little kids, even though we had a pool in our neighborhood, we joined and went to Alpharetta for swim lessons and that type of thing if you don't have it. But maybe take a look at what their program is, as well as do the assessment of what's going on. Take a look at their facilities.
At a minimum, I would think that we would contract out the management of the pool in any scenario that I can envision at this point. And let me add, in addition to the main pool, there is a small splash pad kiddie pool right next to it also.
Okay. Anybody else? Anything else on the pool? I think the general consensus is we're open to hearing more feedback and would like some, more information to move forward with it.
Okay.
The only other question I would have, can we make sure we put some of that stuff in there that turns red?
I just wanted to mention that maybe we can reach out to this email list and let the folks that participated in the past swim team know, because I think they're going to other country clubs in the area because they're assuming that it's not going to be available. If it's a possibility that it could be available, I think we could probably pull it off if the equipment's all in place. And I also know that for 22 years, Terry has offered a very sought-after camp in the summer that includes tennis, swimming, and golf. So that is another, if the community were in favor of that, then that would be a great reason to keep the pool going. So.
Okay.
And I think that's a good idea, because to your point, make sure people are aware so that we can gauge the level of interest. So.
Just a quick question. Is that building next to the pool, that small one, is that where the restrooms are, or do they go into the restrooms in the main? So they go in the main place for the restrooms?
Yeah,
There's outdoor access to the bathrooms along that wall.
Are those in good shape?
Actually go. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Okay.
And those are all set for the Alta season? They can be used?
They are,
Okay.
yes. Part of what we will have to do if we open those facilities, any of the facilities up to the public, is ensure ADA compatibility. So that'll be part of our evaluation of the facility as we move forward. We don't necessarily have to have it ADA compatible at the time we open it, but we have to have a plan in place to make sure that it becomes compatible.
Okay.
And are there showers at all, just restrooms, like a locker room, a changing room? Is there anything included in that existing facility?
There are outdoor showers in the pool area, but they would not have access to the locker rooms, which are inside the building.
Okay.
The locker rooms inside the building have full shower facilities and all that.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Anything else on Country Club?
The only thing I would say for those who came to hear more, the planning process that's currently out for an RFP right now is going to be the process by which we answer a lot of the questions that came up tonight. The RFP proposals are due February 13th, I think was that date. We'll have some evaluation time, so we would anticipate probably going to contract with that in the March-April timeframe, at which point that consultant will begin to engage the stakeholder groups for this entire process. So just keep an eye out for that, and Shannon will make sure everybody is well informed on that information.
And one more time, I'm going to stress, please, if there's questions you have that weren't brought up tonight, or any of your neighbors, or any of the public that's watching, please, communicate with us, give us emails, call us, whatever it takes, to make sure that you're part of the process.
Mayor, could I just jump in with one last thing on this? Sure. Just from a security standpoint, when we sat down last week and we started to prioritize what steps we were going to be taking, obviously security was high on the list. First thing we had to do was secure the building, which has been done. But the security of the exterior, we will be erecting signs. Some may have even gone up already regarding temporary closing of the trails within the golf course, now park. We'll put them at the top. We'll put them along. I believe we'll have some along the roadway where you can enter the park. But one thing we have to understand, just like one of the gentlemen who got up and spoke today, many of the residents have direct access. So they're just walking out of their backyard and entering the trails. And we've gotten a few calls on that already. And there's really no way for us to be able to control for that, nor do I believe we probably want to. But what we did do from an outside the neighborhood perspective, we do have police officers basically taking their calls from the parking lot there. I have pulled in, we've had them there for about 5 days. I've pulled in at various hours over the last 5 days, and I have yet to find one where I didn't find an officer in there. So we're keeping controlled access from anybody that doesn't that can't enter through their backyard. Understand, however, that people will enter and wander that have always done that have walked the trails back there. But the signs will be telling people that the trails are closed as you enter from the exterior access points. Additionally, the easement issue, which is what one of the other gentlemen were talking about, because that is another point where you enter. It appears, and I have to wait for Ken to get back to us on this, but it appears that all of those easements are specific to golf course-related easements, golf cart-related easements. And it's likely that we would be abandoning all of those easements. It's going to involve us reconstructing a lot of the trails because some of those trails go through private property on those easements. And it's just going to be a process for us to work through that.
And I think that, and again, we'll have to confirm that, but I think that will alleviate some of the fears, too, of some of the residents that may have a golf cart path or whatever close to their home. So, Rick, I think you had some.
Yeah, are we along those lines, Steve, are we looking at doing some type of a temporary fence, at least beyond the clubhouse across the front to restrict access from the outside, or are we just going to have signs up there?
So, if I might, I might add a little bit to that. Along the front of the building is pretty well secured, but when you look at the maintenance area, the pool area, the trail that goes down behind the tennis courts, we've erected some pedestrian gates at that point to limit access down towards the eastern leg, and we'll have some signage there. So it's fairly well secured across the front of the country club piece.
It's along the High Grove, right? It's along, is it High Grove? Where you have a significant adjacency, am I saying the wrong road?
Right, yes.
Significant adjacency where you can just wander onto the course.
Yes. I also maybe make a suggestion, Shannon, if you wouldn't mind, obviously through you, Steve, maybe communicate the fact, when you bring up the fact that we've had police officers taking calls out of the parking lot there, maybe communicate with the HOA that that's what they're doing so that folks in the neighborhood don't see a police officer there and think there's something going on, but that they're just there for general security, general to be available if there's an issue, so it doesn't, concern anybody.
Okay.
And one more question on the RFPs are due on February 13th. So from that point, how much longer until we'll have a decision and can go forward with the stakeholder group meetings and?
Let me break in here. Sorry. Councilmember Bentley's just new to government, aren't you?
I'm sorry.
It takes a long time. No, I'm kidding. Longer than you think.
Day.
It'll be the 14th, right?
All right.
Yeah, not long.
So part of it depends on the quality of the proposals that we receive. If we decide that there are enough that are close that we need to go through an interview process, that's going to add probably 30 days to the process. Otherwise, generally after we get that, it's about 30 to 45 days by the time we work our way through a contract and have that contract back to council for approval.
And Carter, if you don't mind, and just for the general public, once that company consultant is chosen, then we'll come up with a timeline and a process and a community engagement meetings and
that's correct.
Input and all that. So we probably don't know the time frame on that yet, but that's when everybody will get together to come up with a plan. Correct?
That's correct. So part of the process will be helping us understand what we need to do for the course and who we need to talk to and who the stakeholder groups are and how we need to organize those and bring those groups into the process.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Sudi, do we have any public comment on item number 3?
Oh, we do not, sir.
Okay, we'll call item number 3.
This is discussion of RZ 1709, text amendment to Article 9, Crabapple Form-Based Code 4.9 as it relates to parking. Ms. Kathy Field.
And I want to excuse me, Kathy, and just thank you to all the citizens that came here for the country club. It looks like not as many are interested in parking, Kathy.
What's up with that?
Story of my life. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, with your permission, my presentation will deal with items number 3 and number 4. They're both the same proposed changes. They're just in the different codes. Okay, so that's why they're listed separately. Just by way of background, when we changed to a form-based code for Deerfield and Crabapple, which really moved away from precise uses such as offices and retail and townhomes, single-family residential, and moved to a form-based code, which is more of a mixed-use type of zoning, we did not change the parking requirements, which reside in a different section of the zoning ordinance. Therefore, they still align to specific uses, such as office, medical office, retail, restaurant. And with the form-based code, which is really a mixed-use type of development, we felt that we needed to change the parking to reflect the type of development that we are creating in both of our form-based code areas. And we did look at other parking requirements of other neighboring cities to find out what they were requiring. And with that in context, we determined that using the overall rate of 3.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet would be sufficient and would move us away from over-parking requirements, increased impervious surface. So we do propose to change our requirements in both the Deerfield and the Crabapple to 3.5 spaces per 1,000 feet. The exceptions to this requirement are single-family uses will still need to provide 2 parking spaces per unit, and lodging units, i.e. hotels, motels, etc., will require 1 parking space per room. This amendment, though, would also permit me as the Community Development Director to grant a 10% overall reduction in parking by warrant, which, as you know, is an administrative variance. We feel this recommended change will reduce the amount of impervious surface and allow for shared parking whereby spaces can be allocated based on use and time of day. And the concept of shared parking is that those parking spaces used for offices during the day can be used in the evening for restaurants or residential lofts or whatnot. So it's a much more efficient way of looking at our parking needs and to really move us away from over-parking. And we see it all the time with the hundreds of empty parking spaces around town that we think have an over-parking requirement. And the other thing I'd like you to visualize, too, is you think of this Crabapple Village, and I believe we're building out a wonderful village, that we don't need to look at each use in terms of a parking requirement, because the idea is that you would park once and then you would move from store to restaurant to store to restaurant, whatnot, that you don't need to aggregate each use a mandated amount of parking. And so we should look at it as a much more fluid type of movement in terms of parking standards and parking habits. And we are changing those, and I think that we've got a very outdated parking code currently, and I would like to change to something that I think is much more effective. And if you look at the other, we have attached here all the other neighboring cities, and you'll see that they're much lower than the 3.5. And just one more point is currently what our codes are is for an office, it's 2.8 spaces per 1,000, so a little under 3. For medical office, we require 4 per 1,000. For retail, 4 per 1,000, and restaurant, 10 per 1,000. So that's where we currently are, which is way higher than what other cities are. And even at the 3.5, it would also not require us every time we changed out a restaurant to a retail to reallocate the number of parking spaces, because that's really where we are at this point. And I just think that's very inefficient. We should just realize we've got a mixed-use village development, and let's not overpark it. So.
And I would say, there definitely times are changing, and as we move to the future, there'll probably be less and less need for as much parking with different alternative transportation and autonomous cars and
that
Ubers
is exactly
and things
correct,
like that.
Mayor.
So,
yes, I agree.
And I guess it'd be safe to say, too, it can help with some green space, too, because we're not, just paving big parking lots, too.
Correct.
So, questions for Kathy? Rick?
I'm sure. Kathy, would this allow, I guess, with redevelopment, would allow in existing areas to change to this parking requirement? I guess I'm thinking more along Highway 9, and maybe you can even tell me what is the current that we have for the Target, that whole area. Do we know what that is, what that parking requirement was when they built that out?
Well, again, it's based on our existing, which is 4 spaces for retail, 10 for restaurant, 2.8 for office, and 4 for medical office. So that's the current number that's being used for parking, and that Target was built based on those requirements. Okay, but were we to change this in the future, if we started to build some out parcels or other mixed uses in there, the idea is it would revert to the 3.5.
So they could, if they came back and said we want to do some redevelopment or some changes, they could come forward to the city and ask.
That is correct.
Reduce some of the parking that we have today out there that's usually empty most of the time.
And to give you an example of where a business fell victim to that is in the Publix shopping center over there. There is a restaurant facility that came in, and they were restricted on what they could do. It actually, we've had quite a few restaurants come through that one building over there. None have had much success. And this last one that came in that appears to be doing well, they were looking to have an outside eatery, but the parking, which should have been shared parking, because there's certainly no parking issue there, prohibited them from doing that. We're working through that with them as we speak, but that just gives you an example of what this the impact of the overparking.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
And I got to make a point so I don't get in trouble from the planning commissioners, but this was a 3-3 vote for the last 2 months. I agreed with staff, so it was 6-0 because we wanted to move it forward. So that's all.
Yes.
But I totally agree with staff.
And thank you for mentioning the Planning Commission. They did have one point that I would want to bring forward, is that they were concerned in regard to the requirement for visitor parking in those residential areas that we have within the form-based code. Right now, the requirement is that there's a minimum of 0.3 visitor parking space per dwelling unit. And that has to be provided either in a designated parking area within that development or on-street parking. The Planning Commission felt that should stay in the rules. It should not be deleted. We had proposed, we staff, that be deleted. And the reason is because when we build the driveways for residential units, we require a minimum of 20 feet in length. And so each driveway could accommodate a visitor car. And so that's the reason that we didn't feel. Again, we were trying to eliminate that over parking. So.
And this is really a part of this, but I just was curious on the how many handicap parking spaces are required typically in a office space or whatever on a parking basis? Is there like a formula where handicap is required for that?
Yes,
as well?
it's based on the square footage.
Square footage,
Yeah.
okay. So, and basically, as we're doing this in square footage, 3.5 spaces per feet, I'm sure there's a formula as well that we'll have to come up with.
Well, absolutely, yeah. We would have to accommodate the handicap parking as well.
Right,
yes.
and so would that be in this, or would that be somewhere else?
It's just part of the ADA requirements.
ADA requirements?
So we
Okay.
would have to respect it.
Gotcha.
This couldn't supersede the
Right.
ADA requirement.
Cannot, yeah. Right, okay. I didn't know that had to be included or not, more of a text question. So,
I understand. That's actually a valid point. Are there any situations where a use would require more handicap spots than currently currently allocated under this plan? I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, I'd have to do an analysis of it. I think we'd be all right, but I take your point.
yeah, it's just something we probably need to look
Yes,
at
it's
closer.
certainly worth looking into, and we certainly would.
Anything else? All right. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay.
And so, I know those, do we need to discuss each? I mean, I know you said it for both areas. Do we need to call out
It's the same for each.
Right.
Do we need to call the separate
One was
number
Crab Apple,
4?
one was Deerfield. I guess I would ask council, is there any specific, is there
It's
specific
a work
questions for
session,
either one, or are they both the same? So,
But,
okay.
so are you in agreement then, that I can move forward with that?
Yeah, I think that,
Great.
okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sue, do we have any, so we're moving on to item 5. Do we have any comments for item number 5?
We do not, sir.
Okay, if you'd please call that out.
This item is discussion of T6 within the Deerfield Form-Based Code as it relates to residential uses. Ms. Kathy Field.
I've got that right. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, fine. I can put this up there if you want. If you can put that one up. I don't know. It wasn't Enzo, I think. There, that's fine. That'll do. Just to back up just a little on terms of this discussion, if you remember, we were talking about the T6 area. I guess my pointer isn't going to work, of the Deerfield Form-Based Code, and it is the very dark purple area in the southeast section there, and that is basically 233 acres. That represents the T6 area. And if you remember, I had brought before you the idea of eliminating residential uses from the T6. That is our highest density transect zone. And we were getting a lot of interest from developers who wanted to put single-family homes in some of the vacant land there. And we felt that from an economic development point of view that should not be considered. Subsequent to that, staff thought more about it and felt that the different development patterns that are coming through now for live, work, play type of developments do include, to some degree, apartments, which are vertical housing construction, and that apartments could be an appropriate use in this very high densified area. Therefore, we came back with a request to eliminate all residential uses with the exception of apartments. And we pointed out to you that in our form-based code, there were 2 criteria that were included for apartment use. And that was, number 1, that you could, if you had an apartment building, it would be allowed if the first story were a non-apartment use. The other criteria was that if more than 50% of the development was not apartment use, but some other use, such as office, retail, or hotel. You approved the change that was proposed to allow for apartment use, but asked staff to look at perhaps lowering that percentage from 50% of apartments, with the other 50 being a non-residential use, to maybe 25% being apartments, which means 75% would be a non-apartment use. So staff did go back to look at that, and we've got some thoughts for you on this. First of all, we would like to have you consider deleting entirely the criteria that allows an apartment building with a non-apartment use on the first floor. Just take that out. And then the second part is that you can either keep it, that we would take that percentage requirement and take it out of the zoning code, the form-based code where it resides, and put it as a condition of the use permit, because the apartments would have to get a use permit. And that way the discussion could take place within the context of that use permit. Now, right now it's at 50%. 50% could be residential, and then it would have to have another 50% to be non-residential. We could keep it there, or we could change it to the 25-75, which was a proposal at the last meeting. I would suggest to you that because it is a use permit, that you may want to keep the flexibility, and that you don't have to approve it at 50. You could make a condition of the use permit that it go down, but you may find a development that comes in with these live, work, play type of developments, and Avalon is your perfect example. As you drive down West Side Parkway, what do you see but that big apartment high-rise that's right there? That you may want that flexibility, and with a use permit, you would have that opportunity. So by limiting it and constricting it to 25%, are you really going to achieve what you want to achieve? And so that's my second thought on the matter. I just want to bring that forward.
Okay. I'd make a comment. And I tend to agree with that. Number one, we're only talking about a small area in Milton. And, we don't all know what the future is. It would be nice to have some flexibility, but also this keeps the control. So we're, it's not all by right. It has to come before us. And I also want to make a statement for the public. Anytime you're using the term apartment, that doesn't necessarily, it's a residential use. It could be a condominium or something like that. So it's not just, an apartment complex. But Rick and then Joe.
I guess along the same lines, do we have anything in our code or ordinance that really spells out what Joe had just said? Or could we clarify that a little bit more? Because I just know when I see apartments, even though we're saying it here, I always think of apartment buildings like what we have on Morris Road.
Right. Robin, can you?
Let me look at it. So it's all in a Deerfield, it's all in form-based code, so we look up in the definitions within that. So, yes, I will.
Okay. Joe?
I can get you the definition.
So in the middle of the information you were providing, it sounded like you said there were certain instances where we were doing away with the residential over retail. Did I misunderstand you, or are there certain situations where we're not allowing that?
But our thought was that most residential type of development is what I refer to as a horizontal use. It spreads out. It doesn't go up. The only one that it goes vertical is the apartment one. And that therefore, because the land is so, it's very densely zoned, and it's so important to us from an economic development point of view, we thought any horizontal type of residential development would be really using a lot of land up that would be best served for higher and denser uses.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You mentioned that there's 233 acres of T6. Do you know how much of that is developed? How much is open to be developed?
Oh, that's a good question. I know we've got two key parcels that are.
And one was the next door neighbor.
One was the next door neighbor.
What was that, 30-ish acres back in the day?
It was about 20.
I thought 20.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we've got one on 400 that's right next to Alpharetta. That's a large undeveloped parcel. But, a lot of the parcels in that area, I think, are underutilized from a development perspective. And the best example I can give you is across the street from our old City Hall, that Verizon That's your old style of office development, and that's really an old development pattern, and I could easily see something like that being redeveloped. As a matter of fact, we always try to convince Verizon that's just what they should do. They've got a sea of parking with mid-rise office buildings, and that's a perfect redevelopment site as far as I'm concerned. So it's just not empty, undeveloped sites, but I think some of these other sites that have great potentiality.
Well, when in my opinion, and I voted a couple weeks ago for this, hoping that we could change it, is we mentioned Avalon. I don't see any type of Avalon I don't see the mass of properties there to have any type of Avalon type development, nor necessarily the demand for one, a mile up the road from Avalon. So, and when I think apartments, no matter what the definition says, apartment's going to be an apartment. It's obviously we're outlawing single detached, type houses and townhouses and that sort of thing. So I do think it's key for us. I think it does give us some flexibility with reducing that number from 50 to 25. I would like to see us at least strongly consider that, because still that gives us 25% of square footage to add to some sort of rental type units. And while I think we probably might need to have that for potentially for some type of development to go in there, I sure don't want to see it at 50%. So I would like to hopefully think that we consider that.
Okay.
And my comment is the same. I did not vote for this, and so I want to make sure I understand that we're striking the "or" part, the first floor of every building.
Yes, that's
so
correct.
That's
yes.
going to be gone.
That's going to be gone.
And so then my comment is going back to our very limited commercial areas. I hate to see us put in more residential where we are a city that is 80, I don't know what the percentage is, percent residential. So I would also agree that I am in favor of getting that percentage down. I guess I'd like to know maybe if I had an example of how the flexibility could serve us better, I might be more able to justify that. But right now, with our limited commercial area, that's what's bothering me about this residential aspect of our T6.
So why? And I might have missed it, but why are we striking the first floor resident or retail component again?
Because I believe the conversation we had the last time was that if you had a 10-story building and you just had non-residential on the first floor, the other 90% would be apartments. So that was why.
I know. I mean, I'm more in Laura's camp, and I would like the percentage 0, like I said at the last meeting. I mean, I'm looking at all the other surrounding areas, and it's office. There's some townhomes there. And I'm thinking out of all the residential purposes we're going to strike is everything that I would feel like we would want with a commercial. I think we all want primarily a commercial area there. I think that's a no-brainer. But I also feel like is cramming a bunch of apartments in there and for the benefit of the community, and I can't go there. And so, we can always say, well, use permit, you have to go through the process, and you can do the same thing with a rezoning. If someone wants to rezone it to apartments, they can go through the process as well. I don't see how apartments fit that area at all. That's just my opinion.
And I certainly see everybody's point. I think the thing that, I like the idea of having flexibility is times are changing, and as we see, there's not as much demand for just strictly office space and office buildings versus you mix some residential, it goes up. You get a mixed use where people can live and work and whatnot. So, again, I'm totally, I get it. And out of the 200-something acres, I wouldn't want to see a big mass of it. But, I'm thinking if there's a 2 or 3 acre parcel that really makes sense where it's kind of a key location and a really good use that would be attractive for the city. That's why I like a little bit of flexibility. But, Matt?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think so long as we have the flexibility as a staff to make the decisions for any proposals that come before us, we can still deny, and we legally confirm that we still have that. But I'm okay with the staff recommendations on that just to make sure we have some tighter controls. There's nothing wrong with that either. So, so I'm okay with what you're proposing here.
Mayor, could I jump in a second?
You can.
Just to, Kathy, this is way before my time, but correct me if I'm wrong. Originally, this T6 area was identified possibly as a TOD, a transit-oriented development, centered around what could be coming up from the south. So these TODs are usually fairly dense, mixed-use type developments. Is there some?
That is correct.
So that's kind of what has driven the development of this T6. We would like to see as much taking advantage of as much vertical space in that area as we possibly can. But that is also what kind of drove that residential. That's why it wasn't stricken originally from the form-based code when you created it, because they do have those TODs are those live, work, play type environments.
And that was kind of my point. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not looking to put more density in apartments or whatever, but we do have a small amount of commercial and area, and rather than it not working with modern as far as a use for just strictly office, but if it could be office and retail on it, and then put above it you put some residential, that may be a use. So that's where I'm coming from. But again, I think probably clear as mud from the comments from council. I don't know. We may need to kind of dissect that a little from the direction. Not sure where we're getting at as far as any direction. Are you picking up anything, Steve?
Yeah, I am. The one concern I have is, are you looking for a differentiation on the definition of apartment? Because that might help some, as I'm trying to feel through this, might help some of the situation.
I think, Robin, did you get that?
Yeah, I found it.
Do you want to read that definition?
Yes, and it speaks to use and not ownership. But it says apartment means a building which contains 3 or more dwelling units either attached to the side, above, or below another unit. The term apartment also refers to a dwelling unit attached to a non-residential building. So it all speaks to use and not to whether it's fee simple or for rent or whatever. So
if that's something that may help this along a little bit, maybe there's something we can do regarding that definition. I don't know. I'm putting that out to you. If that's,
is that even possible? And that my point was just so that you didn't preconceive it had to be an apartment per se. It could be a high-end condominium or flats or something like that. And I don't know legally if we can even, can we dictate that?
I will say in Alpharetta, they do discern between condos and apartments.
Mm-hmm.
We do not here.
And are they for sale? Do they dictate for sale for sale condos?
Whether it's fee simple or rental.
Okay.
And that may be some relief there too if some folks had some heartburn on that. I don't know if that's legal.
Because I'm good with flexibility, but I don't know if 50% is that seems to be a little more than flexible. But if we were to define the type ownership, I think we would all be maybe a little more open to condos.
And would that be something that would be basically when they come in with an application, if someone did want to come forward with a use permit, we could have them delineate what it is that they're building? Because that's I think where I get a little heartburn. It's like we've got so many apartments along that corridor today, which impacts. It's a form of living, but again, we just don't want to. I think what you're hearing from all of us, that's not what we'd like to see added. So I think if anything came forward where someone wanted to propose, I'd be interested in knowing what is it that you're really building. Are these for sale? Are they rental? Are they true apartments?
Well, why don't maybe a suggestion, and staff, you can go back and look, is if we could, and if council's okay, we could delineate or delegate it that it would be for sale, be simple, owned, not apartments, but condominiums or flats or whatever, owned by individuals. And then if someone wanted rental, there might be a process where they, part of the, I know they're going to bring it back anyways, but, where we state that it's owned properties.
They need a variance.
But then a variance if, somebody wanted to apply for one.
I can start going there a little bit when it's that way.
So is council okay to look at that if the staff brings it back?
I just didn't like when it just said apartments, and then then we can assume that it means this and that. I think you need to spell it out. What is it that we're saying instead of trying to refer them back to another definition? you may as well just spell it out. What is it that we're looking for?
Yeah.
That would be my
I
suggestion.
think we just need to be open enough. I think we've done a good job in Milton. This is not all our commercial areas. It's not getting into any of our, quote, residential areas and our green space areas. But if you look around and all, we've got some of our neighboring cities that have gotten older, and they've just said no, 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 and just kept the bedroom-type developments. And all of a sudden, the citizens are moving out and not very happy because they don't have a small center area that's got a little bit of, something different and some energy and whatnot. So I think we need to at least be open-minded to it. So would that give you enough direction to at least bring something back? Steve, do you feel like?
I believe so. I just have one question on that. It seemed like you were all in agreement about striking the first part of that. That would be the first floor commercial. Should we start that process separately? Because that would be a text amendment, correct? Because that's in the zoning code. So should we? Go ahead.
All of that would be, we'd have to start from zero for everything.
But this is going to require, this piece is going to require us coming back to council for more feedback, and that will slow down that process. What I'm thinking is, and I would like some direction on this, would you prefer to, because right now someone could come in with this project.
But they still need a use permit.
They would still need the use permit, that's correct. So you feel comfortable with just doing it all at once?
I feel pretty good with.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that we would certainly, if someone came in, we could certainly voice what we've been hearing from the city council as well, and that would be good information for them to take into their,
Okay. Anybody else? Rick?
Just one last question then. Kathy, once we get this worked out, what the verbiage is, this would also apply if someone wanted to do redevelopment, then it would fall under this. Is that correct?
Yes, but now we've been talking about the T6
T6 only,
area.
right?
T6.
So you said it was 233 acres.
That's right,
okay.
and it would
only
be,
a small portion of that is not developed today.
That's right, and so anything that comes in the future would fall under this.
We would love to see redevelopment.
So
yes, I would be happy to have that happen.
So as right now, there's no by right residential development in T6, correct?
That is correct.
In T6.
No, with the exception of what your approval at the last meeting was, you allowed for the 50% of apartments.
But they need a use permit.
With a use permit.
So no by right residential right
yes,
now.
you're
Okay.
absolutely right.
Okay.
It's not blanket. They have to come before us.
Yep.
All right. You guys.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to staff reports. Carter, you got 2 seconds. Oh, yeah. Kidding.
Kidding for Carter.
Yeah. He's over across the street. The meeting over there.
Is that what you need?
That's it.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll try to be as brief as Carter usually is. He told me about 5 minutes, so. First, starting off with our T-SPLOS program update. We've gotten the revenues for December, which represent November's spending, and we're at about 90% of what was projected. And if you remember, all of our project lists are based on a tier of 85% of projected, and then 100% of projected, and 115. So in the overall T-SPLOS program, we're still tracking at about 85% in that actual cumulative revenue. And then wanted to touch on a few of the both T-SPLOS projects and some local projects that are underway. In November of 2017, we came to you with the North Fulton Transportation Plan draft recommendations. That process was put on hold as the countywide transit master plan was wrapping up. So we plan to come back in late February or early March with that, the North Fulton Transportation Plan adoption. We've put out a proposal for batch 2 of the T-SPLOS projects, which is Hopewell Road at Hamby Road and Hopewell Road at Thompson Road intersection improvements. That concept contract will be on the January 29th agenda for approval, so we're getting ready to move forward with those. The Freemanville at Providence project is in right-of-way. It's over halfway done in the right-of-way acquisition, and we plan to bid that in early March. And the Mayfield Road sidewalk project is currently under construction and should be complete in April of this year. So that's just overview of a couple projects going on, and if you have any other questions, I'll try to answer them.
Any questions for Sarah?
Yeah.
Go.
So if you back up to the previous slide, do we expect to recover the amount that we're claiming as difference, or is that just a timing thing from when we thought the program was going to start versus when it actually started, or when we thought the county was going to be sending us funds versus when they actually did, or whatever it happens to be?
So now that we've got over 6 months of data, back in the end of October, the county initiated a reassessment of the projections. Georgia State University did those, and so that update is underway right now, and they should have more answers on if it was, some delayed revenues to begin with, that everyone wasn't applying the tax initially and that we should recover. So
okay.
We should have an update in the next couple months.
Because every time I see that number, my blood pressure starts to go up, because I start thinking somebody's withholding from us and we're never going to see it. And so that's just a constant reminder of what's been taken away. So if we actually are going to recover it, I'm okay.
I don't know that we're going to recover it.
Oh.
I don't want to lull you into a false sense of security.
The thing is, you just hope that number doesn't go up.
Right.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Sarah.
All right, thanks.
And last but not least, Chief Edgar.
We put him last now? Yeah, I think there's some efforts here to put me last from now on, so I'm
I said last but not least.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. First thing is the House Bill 146, the cancer bill that was put forth before the state and all, and it's been approved. The city has acquired the cancer policy for our firefighters. So we are now taking efforts in our department to secure proper hooding that we wear to protect our firefighters. They've come out with new hoods that are better, provide better protection to prevent the contaminants from being absorbed through the skin. We're doing new contamination procedures on fire scenes as well as when we get back to the station. And we're also putting in forth policies where the firefighters have to adhere to different policies before they can actually go back in service, such as cleaning the equipment, cleaning the trucks, taking showers, and all of those things. So we're doing our part to help make sure that, not only that the state and the city's doing it, but we're doing our part as well. So the firehouse sub-grant that we requested about a month and a half or 2 months ago, we learned that we were granted that grant. We've going to receive just over $19,000 for ballistic vests and helmets. So we should have those in probably about 2 months, have those on the trucks for our personnel. And our training trailer is going to be delivered next Monday. It was supposed to be this week, but due to the weather, it's being built up in the Chicago area, so they're dealing with a little bit more weather than we have been, so it's been delayed a little bit. So they will be delivering that next Monday. And following that, we should have some training that's going on with the trailer and how to set it up and do all that. And our awards banquet is next Saturday, so I hope that I'll see you all there. It's at 5 p.m. at the Metropolitan Club on the 27th. And I always like to end on a good story and a heartfelt story. On Saturday, our T-Lair team was requested out to the city of Marietta to a family that their horse was down. They called the Marietta Fire Department. They could not help them. The call came to us. It was kind of a cry for help that if we couldn't do anything for him, the vet was there ready to euthanize the horse. Our team went out there and was successful in rescuing this horse, getting him back up on his feet. And we learned again today that that horse is doing fine. So kudos to our T-Lair team and our firefighters there. And that's it. Any questions?
Questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Matt? That will conclude our meeting session. So, thank you, guys.